This is the part of the process where things really start to take shape. So by the end of this video, we'll have attached our handles and our contrast bottom, and we'll have cut out the corners in order to form the base of our bag. Are you ready? Let's get to it. We've come to step 7 in the process, which is all about attaching the handles. So the first thing you need to do is take your quilted panel and lay it right side up so that the short edge is on the top and on the bottom. Then you're going to follow the pattern and mark some lines. So I've already done that. I've marked, I'm sure you cannot see this on camera, but there's a big long line that goes this way and a line that goes this way. And then over here, there's a line that's horizontal and a line that is vertical. And I'm going to take one of my handles and I'm going to place it with the wrong side facing down. So the wrong side, the part with the seam, should in fact be touching the exterior fabric here. And I'm going to align this handle so that the handle is inside the line. So the line is here and I've placed the handle here and not over here. All right, so the handle is inside the line and the bottom of the handle is meeting up with that bottom edge line that I've drawn on there. And I'm just going to use a pin and I'm going to pin it in place. I would like it if I could do this with clips because I don't like using pins, but what are you going to do? So I'm going to put one in the bottom and the top and then maybe just one in the middle just to secure it in place. Then I'm going to do the same, but I'm going to make sure that I do not twist this handle. So I could, turn it all the way around and then have a twist in my handle, but that would make me sad forever. So I'm just going to be careful and make sure I do not twist it. And once again, I'm making sure that the side with the seam on it is touching the fabric. The handle is inside the line and butted up against the lines that I've drawn. And I'm just going to pin it in place. I don't know, it's way easier for me to do this on the other side for some reason. And if you have sewn your handles together, like I have, you'll see that that part where the sewing together starts is just above the lip of the edge of the bag. So there's another pin there, and then I'll just put one more pin in just to add a little bit of extra security, making sure I'm lining up that handle with the right side. Whoa. And I've already done that with the other side, so now my bag should look something like this. My exterior panel's got my handles that are attached. I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew along the bottom edge of one of my handles. I'm going to do this for all 4 handles. And I don't know why, but I find this part tedious. I don't know why, but for some reason, whenever I come to this part in the bag making process, I'm like, oh, there's 4 of them? Jeez Louise. But it's not that bad. You got to sew along the bottom of the handle, up one side. Then you're going to create a boxed X inside those 2 lines that you've drawn, come back down the other side and across the bottom, and that will secure the handle. You'll do that to each of the 4 sides. And when I've got that done, I'll be right back and show you what that looks like. Oh, and the point here is to use, I would recommend a thread that matches your webbing on the top in your needle, and then I would use a thread that matches your lining fabric in the bobbin because you kind of want to minimize those stitching lines, unless of course you're going for contrast, in which case fill your boots, toots, do whatever makes you happy. So I'm going to go sew this and I'll be right back. The handles are attached. I've sewn them in place, and now you can almost start to see what this bag, might look like. And in the next section of this video, we're going to be attaching the contrast bottom. So let's hop over there and take care of that. We've come to step 8, which is about attaching the contrast bottom. So for this section, what you're going to need is your quilted panel, your contrast bottom, and then you're going to need a marking tool and some pins. So first thing the pattern tells us to do is to find the center of both long edges. So again, we could measure, or I'm just simply going to fold them wrong sides together, and I'm going to align the edges and make sure that the corners are meeting nicely. And then I'm just going to take my pen and I'm going to mark, when it's on like black fabric, but I'm going to mark where that center line is. So I'm just going to pick it up and just draw a line. I'm going to do the same thing to find the center of this over here. And I like to do this where it's kind of laying on the ground. And then I might open it up and draw a more obvious mark. It might be pretty hard to see on video, but I've just marked both centers of the top and the bottom edge if we're going to orient it that way. Okay, done with my marking tool. Now I'm going to take my contrast bottom, unclip the name tag from it, And one of the dimensions should match perfectly with one of the dimensions. So if we lay it across our bag bottom or quilted panel like this, you'll see that this is the same dimension. It's the same width, or it should be like pretty close to it. I already have marked the center of my contrast bottom. So what I'm going to do is align this center with the mark that I theoretically just made on this, but is so hard to see because it's black fabric. Where did that mark go? I'm just going to redo it because I literally can't see that mark that I just made. No big deal. I do want, I mean, you could measure this, like I said, but I think it's there. Okay, I can see that. I think it's just maybe better to do it by folding things in half because there's a chance that your bag panel is not perfectly square. Okay, yes, I can see it. So I'm going to align one of the raw edges, you know, 2 of the long edges should be folded under, and then you should have 2 short raw edges. And I'm going to line the center mark of my contrast bottom with the center mark that I just made on my quilted panel. And I'm going to pin that in place just so that they're in the right spot. Then I'm going to come down to the bottom, and wouldn't you know it, either I cut my contrast, my panel a little bit smaller than what was intended, or else I cut my contrast bottom a little bit bigger because they're not exactly the same size. Let me see if I can lay this out. So they're different by about 1/4 inch, but that's not really a big deal. It's not a problem. We'll just trim it off later on. So again, very forgiving, this pattern. Don't worry about it if things are not perfectly aligned. Well, there goes some pins and etc. I'm just going to do my very best to make sure that I'm aligning this as well as I can. And I'm going to pin it in place so that that center mark is basically aligned with the center mark on the quilted panel. Then I'm going to throw a few more pins in here just to hold this contrast bottom in place. And I don't know if you can guess what's coming next, but spoiler alert, the next step is to actually quilt this. So yes, we've already quilted the quilted panel, and now we're going to add more quilting in the form of attaching this contrast bottom. And trust me when I say that I tried to figure out any number of different ways that we could have done this pattern so that we didn't have to quilt and then requilt, but this is the only way that I could figure out because you'll notice that the folded edges of this contrast bottom are now covering up the bottom of these handles. So if I wanted that really professional look where the contrast bottom covered up the handles, this was really and truly the only way to accomplish it. Just trust me. I tried. I really tried. So I'm going to just put in a couple more pins because I don't really want this to shift as I'm quilting it. 2 more. 2 more. And then I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to quilt it all up. Now, it begs the question, do you really have to quilt this? And the answer is no, you do not. If you are done with quilting by this point and you're like, Shelly, I'm just not into it. And honestly, I think that the quilting lines on this fabric are basically going to be invisible. So even though I'm going to quilt it, you'll never know that. You'll never know that I quilted it. However, you do need to attach this contrast bottom to this quilted panel. So at the very least, I would suggest that you sew it together along all 4 edges. So I would sew along the top edge, and then I would just top stitch 1/8 of an inch away from this folded edge. And that's gonna make sure that, you know, it is truly and wonderfully attached. Then I would go across the bottom and same thing, top stitch 1/8 of an inch away. Really, I'd be sewing 1/8 of an inch away from all 4 sides. And then when you have your bag, it'll still, you know, have that contrast bottom. It just won't be quilted all the way through. So it's a personal choice. It's up to you. On this bag, like this very specific particular bag, I don't think it really matters if I quilt through the bottom or not because you're never going to really see those quilting stitches. They're basically going to be invisible. But if I had a light pink bottom on here, I think I would like to add the quilting because I think it would add an extra dimension. It makes it just look a little bit more professional. And when I tested this at retreat and I showed all these prototypes to all my friends, everybody agreed that the one that had the unquilted bottom looked almost like a little bit saggy. I don't know how else to say that, but it looked a little bit saggy, like the fabric wasn't really held in place, almost like a I mean, I did my best, but it just didn't look as professional or as finished as the ones that I did where I did quilt it. So I'm going to take the time. I'm going to go pop in a little audiobook and or maybe a short podcast, because I think this might take me 15 minutes tops. And I'm going to quilt all of those lines that I have drawn on here. And then I'll be back and show you what that looks like. And again, I'm going to pick a top thread that matches my contrast bottom and a bobbin thread that's going to match my lining fabric so that I'm minimizing the look of those stitches. Okay, time to quilt. Ta-da! I've come back from quilting and the bottom panel, the contrast bottom, has been attached. You can really only see those quilting lines on the lining fabric, and because I used a thread that is complementary or very similar to the lining fabric, it's pretty hard to even tell that those lines are there. And in the end, you know what? I kind of cheated and I only quilted lines every 1 inch apart. It still holds the bottom on very well and it looks nice, but I just thought, you know what? It's kind of a waste of time to be spending all this energy quilting this bottom if you can't even see the lines. Now, before I move on to the next step, I'm just going to take a second and trim up this extra fabric on the side. It's not actually necessary. I don't have to do this at this point, but I just like things to be neat and tidy. So I'm just going to take one little second and trim this off. There we go. Because again, forgiving. So I'm not really sure what mistake I made there, whether I would have cut my quilted panel too small or if I cut my contrast bottom too big. But either way, again, the pattern is super forgiving, no big deal. We've just finished, we've just trimmed off the excess and we're moving on. Okay, so that is the end of step 8, where we have now attached our contrast bottom. And in the next step, we're going to be taking this piece and turning it into something that's starting to look more and more like a bag. We've come to step 9 in the process, which is all about preparing our quilted panel. So for this step, what you're going to need is the quilted panel we've been working on. You're going to need a marking tool, you're going to need some clips or pins, and a ruler. Okay, first thing we have to do is bring this together, bringing the short edges together, right sides together. So your handles should be touching and you should be looking at your lining fabric. Now what you're going to do is align the top corners and then open this up and take a peek. And you're going to make sure that when you clip these two sides together, because that's what we're going to do, in a second we're going to be sewing down the sides, but we want to make sure that we are sewing down the sides, aligning everything perfectly or as best we can. So I'm going to take really special care with this intersection right here. And I want to make sure that the two folds, the tops of the contrast fabric, meet each other. So I'm going to take a look at them. I wonder if that's working on the overhead camera. And I'm going to bring them together. And then I'm going to clip that in place. You could use a pin if that is your preference, but just make sure that you take extra special care at that intersection. Now you're going to align the top two corners, okay, and put a clip there. And make sure that those two are aligned nicely. Now we're going to pin all the way or clip all the way along. And I don't know if you can tell this, but there's a little bit extra fabric for me on top than there is on the bottom. And that's totally fine. It just means this somehow was not if you can imagine, this is somehow not a perfect rectangle. But I'm just going to ease in any fullness. So I'm just going to kind of spread out any of that extra fabric along the sides, and it's no big deal, I promise. Then I'm going to do the same on the other side. I'm going to flip it over because I know when I take it to my sewing machine, I'll want it to match. Again, I'm going to take, I like that the fabric matches. It's like both the same fabric. I'm going to make sure that those folds are meeting perfectly or as best I can. And then I'm going to clip that intersection, come up to the top here, clip that intersection, making sure that the corners are as aligned as I can possibly get them to be. Come on, guys. This one doesn't really want to go. And then work in any fullness, just kind of squish it down, put in a couple of clips, hold it in place. Whoopsies. Now I'm going to go to my sewing machine and I'm going to stitch down each side. And I'm going to stitch down a 1/4 inch away from this raw edge. So I'm going to stitch down this side and I'm going to stitch down this side. Okay, with this, it shouldn't really matter what thread color you're using because hopefully we'll never see it. We're about to cover this in binding, but just in case, you might want to use top and bottom bobbin thread that match the lining fabric. If you just want to be really careful about it, that's what you could do. But I'm just going to go stitch down this side and then stitch down this side. BRB. I've sewn down each side and I just used a black thread because I'm going to need it in the next steps for the binding. And I was too lazy to change my thread that I already had in the machine. So that's done. I've sewn down both sides. And then the next step is to mark these corners. So I followed the chart in the pattern and I have marked each corner and I'm going to cut out those corners. So I'm going to take my large pair of scissors and I'm going to cut, like I don't like to use rotary cutters for this part. I like to use scissors because I want to be really precise. And you don't want to cut further than you need to because that's going to cause problems in the next step. So just be as careful as you possibly can and just cut right up to those marks. And I like to, just have a little bit. So I've just got this little cozy that I don't need and I won't be using for anything. But I'm going to cut out the other corner. You know what? I think I cut these too big. I think I marked them too big. That's funny. So this bag is not going to be exactly the same size. That's really funny. I think I actually cut them the wrong size. Yeah, it's confirmed. It's confirmed. I cut them the wrong size. I marked them the wrong size. I marked them the size that you would if you were making a large size tote, but there's no turning back now. I already cut them. So this bag is not going to be the shape and size that I intended because these corners are the things that kind of determine, well, that's funny. These corners are the things that determine how big the bottom of your bag is. And now I've just made this bottom an extra 2 inches bigger than I wanted it to be. But you know what? It's not a problem. It's all going to turn out fine. Except for maybe my corner bindings are going to be too short now. We'll address that when we come to it. Okay, so isn't that funny that you can make mistakes, it's still going to turn out fine. It's not the end of the world. So there's the end of step 9 where I have prepared the bag bottom, like mostly following the instructions, but not 100% following the instructions. And it's actually starting to look like something, isn't it? So it's starting to look like a bag. There's the inside. We're not quite all the way there yet, but stick with me because in the next video, we're going to be attaching the bindings and finishing our bags. So when you're ready, I'll see you there.